free bi-weekly seminars that we do every couple of weeks here at Lake Fork Marina. For those of you that are locals that come here all the time, got some bad news for you. We actually won't be here in 2 weeks. I'll explain it a little bit later. We're going to be doing an out-of-town seminar here in 2 weeks, so we'll explain that a little later at the end. But man, Lake Fork is looking good. She looking good. There's a lot of stuff in the water to throw you bait at right now, like a lot of stuff, and it's the water coming up has been timed almost perfectly with the temperatures coming up. Okay, so everything is pointing these fish towards all that new cover. Even on the main lake, the fish that are on the main lake, they're wanting to be shallow. You got rising water and rising water temps. I think we all can agree and acknowledge and know and understand that fish are going to the bank right now. Even if they're on the main lake, they're going to get shallow. They're not going to be very. I mean, if you go graph out, normally on Lake Fork, you can go graph and see something, see some type of life on any offshore structure you want to out in deeper water. You go graph some right now. I dare you. I dare you to go graph some right now. You ain't going to see a lot out there. The life source of this lake is getting extremely shallow right now. Now there's some stuff in some mid-depth here and there, some bait fish, crappie, whatever, and some mid-depth stuff. Man, there's the majority of the life source of this lake is on the bank. And that's a good thing. It's easily accessible. In some cases you can't get back in far enough in the junk, but a lot of visual fishing. I think all of us as bass fishermen enjoy that. I see target, I throw the target, I catch bass. Like that's, I don't know anybody doesn't like that. When you're talking about that situation, you're talking about, heavy cover, rising water, fish going in the dirt, fish getting up in that junk. Man, there's a few techniques. One other good thing about it is it eliminates a lot of stuff, right? Like you ain't going to throw your rattle trap through there. Right? We ain't square billing. You know what I mean? Like it eliminates a lot of things for you, and it makes it simple because there's just really a few techniques. I would say a swim jig's really good in that. A weedless swim bait can be effective in that. Weightless plastics, flipping baits, and frogs. It's about where the list ends, right? So tonight, me and Cody are each going to pick a technique, and we're going to go in depth on two of those techniques. And the two that I honestly think, from right now until the next few weeks, really, these are the two techniques that you need to focus on the most at Lake Fork. And I'm going to talk about frog fishing, and Cody's going to talk about flipping, flipping that cover. So I guess I'll start with frog fishing if you don't mind, if that's all right with you.
Go ahead.
And if you guys don't know, most of y'all looks like have been here before. I recognize just about everybody in the room, I think. So appreciate you guys coming back. And if you haven't been, I appreciate you coming for the first time. Just ask a question. If you got any questions or anything, just shout them out. However you want to do it, man. It's a real open forum. We just up here talking fishing, hanging out on a Friday night, right? Frog fishing is a lot of fun. Is there anybody here like frog fishing? A few? Everybody? Everybody likes frog fishing. Anybody doesn't like frog fishing?
No.
Yeah, you're in the wrong room. Leave. That's right. That's right. Good one. Man, where do I start with this? It's the equipment is important. The equipment's important. Really, probably the most important thing to be a good frog fisherman is, number one, to get the right equipment. It's really, that is probably half the battle with frog fishing is having the right stuff. If you're out there throwing a frog on a 7-foot medium heavy rod and a 20-pound monofilament line, yeah, you can do that. Good luck getting them to the boat. It's having the right equipment is half of it. And you got, rod's important. You got to have a rod that has the back end to yank them fish out of whatever junk they bury up in and hold on to them for you, right? You got to have the rod that will set a hook at a very long distance because a lot of times you get bites far away from the boat when you're frog fishing. But at the same time, working a frog is kind of finessey, right? Walking it, twitching it, doing different things. To be a really good frog fisherman, you got to have a rod that has enough tip, a soft enough tip to let you work it and do all that good stuff that you want to do with it. But yet has the backbone. So the rod's really important. Line is important as well. You got to have braid. Guys, you got to have braid when you fishing a frog. Back in the day, I heard a few old heads say they're fishing on big mono. I think that is a horrible mistake. You need no shock absorption whatsoever. You need to hammer that hook down, get that fish out of that junk as fast as possible, and get him to the boat. So 50-pound braid is minimum. 65-pound is probably more commonly used. I think you can do 50. Power Pro 50-pound braid, pretty hard to break on in any situation. So maybe you have to retie a little more often with 50-pound braid than you do with 65. Maybe that's kind of something you could point to and say an advantage. And on reels, one of the most important techniques to have a high-speed reel, because when you catch a fish on the surface and you set the hook and he comes at you across the surface, you got to catch up to him, right? Like a lot of times you bring the fish to you real quick, especially if you get a quick hook set, they bite, you set the hook real quick, that fish is going to come at you quick. So you really need like a 8-5 to 1, 8-3 to 1, or a 7-5 to 1. Like I've got an 8-3 to 1 heavy duty reel that I throw mine on. It's a little bit heavier reel, which kind of sucks for twitching a frog all day. But at the same time, I've got oversized gears. That's the other thing about your reel is you want a tough reel, because there's a lot of hard impacts on your reel gears and your drag system and everything else that's inside of your reel. It takes a lot of force. When you hook an 8-pounder in junk with well rope essentially in that big braid, all of the stress goes into your rod and your internal gears of your reel. So like I use a Lew's Super Duty. Now it's a small frame. It's a light LFS light frame Super Duty reel that they made. They don't even make anymore. But they make one similar to it. But you want to have a reel that's got oversized gears. Some reels will say they have oversized gears. That's a good thing to have for frog fishing, because it'll help them hold up to the punishment that frog fishing dishes out. So I think I mean, you don't have to have that. You just might burn through some reels if you don't. If you do it a lot, you might break some reels doing it.
Man, I miss so many fish when they come towards me. It's hard to keep up with that Zenco 33.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that's a challenge.
It is, man.
I imagine that's a challenge. Yeah, you cricket and you bobber is a little different than a frog.
It shows what kind of fisherman I am.
Yeah, that's right. This ain't brim bed, son.
Okay.
But so that's kind of the equipment that we're using. The rod, you guys know, a lot of y'all know that I've designed my own line of rods. So within our line of rods, there's two that you can use. The one that I really prefer to use on a frog is actually our 7.6 medium heavy. But if you've used our rods, it's a little bit longer than a lot of people like a frog rod to be. But I like that because it allows me to have the backbone that I want, and it's long enough that I can taper down and have a good tip, right? So it kind of gives me the right blend of tip and backbone. Now, if it's just absolutely nasty, matted, heavy stuff and you're having to get back in there and get them out, I will at times switch over to our 7.5 heavy. Our 7.5 heavy is a broomstick. It's a stout of a rod. It really should be an extra heavy, and this should probably be a heavy, because you could kind of go back and forth. Every rod has a little different labeling on their powers, but this one is really perfect for what we have now. Those fish are on the edges and in the holes, and it 7.6 medium heavy. Those fish on the edges and the holes with the 7.6 rod, I can still make super long casts, but yet with that softer tip, I can feather that frog in there and land it soft, and I can work it really good as far as walking it back and forth or any subtle action that I want to put on it. So the 7.5, you got a meat stick, man. It's not going to be as easy to walk a frog. You have to be pretty good to walk it with that. You're not going to be able to land it as soft, so you're just more brute force fishing, like matted stuff, if you go to that 7.5 broomstick of ours. But the 7.6 medium heavy, if y'all can take a look at that. If you want to, feel free to just kind of put it on the ground and just lightly bend it so you can kind of feel the tip we're talking about. There's no bend down here, a lot of backbone, but down there you can kind of feel the rod bending at the tip. Be careful doing that if you don't mind, but y'all check that out, pass that around. Don't shove it up there too high in that ceiling fan. And those rods are for sale. All of our LGB rods are for sale downstairs. Everything we show you tonight is going to be for sale in the store. So if you want to get it, you can get it here tonight at Lake Fork Marina. And we would highly encourage you guys to buy things from the tackle store at Lake Fork Marina, because they do such a good job supporting us and allowing us to do these shows. So we're very appreciative of that. Areas that you want to throw a frog in is pretty simple this time of year, right? Like, warmer water is better than cooler water right now, wherever the warmest water is. Having a lot of cover is good for throwing a frog. So, if you got one creek that's got warm water, but the cover's not very thick, not very abundant, there's just not as much flooded junk back there, but you got another cove that has the same water temps and they got a whole lot more junk back there, I'd pick the one that's got a lot more junk, even if the water's dirtier. Like if the water's really dirty and the one that has all the junk, and then the water's pretty clean and the one that doesn't have the junk, I'm still taking for frog fishing, I'm still taking the creek that's got all the junk in it. That's more important than watercolor. Fish will bite a frog in dirty water now. They will, no problem. Especially out here, these fish are kind of used to stained water in this part of the world. So don't be scared to fish in dirty water when you're frog fishing. Yes, sir.
Are you liking more hollow body frogs or more hard body frogs?
Rivets.
Like rivets, like the swimming frog?
Like rivet or...
Yeah, so I should have prefaced this earlier, but to me there's two different, I don't even consider like rivets or zoom horny toads. Man, I don't really even consider that frog fishing. That is a completely different ball game in itself, completely different gear and setup. The soft plastic stuff. Yeah, we're fixing to show you here, but yeah, we're talking about your, Spro popping frog or Spro walking frog, that type of stuff.
Well, on the subject, I don't mean to change on it, but would you use that rod for a chatterbait as well?
I do. For grass. If I wasn't around grass, I would want to lighter. I overpower my chatterbait rod because I fish around vegetation so much, and it makes it easier for me to get those little subtle twitches with the overpowered rod. I think we've had this discussion, before about how I like to have a heavier rod for a chatterbait. A lot of guys like a bendier rod for chatterbait. If I was fishing a lake where I was throwing a chatterbait in more open water, absolutely I would too. It's going to help you keep the fish hooked up better if you had a bendier rod. But I like it. I like the heavier rods for chatterbait fishing in grass. So yes, I do use this rod for chat. This is a very extremely versatile rod. It's almost heavy enough to do anything you want. Carolina rig, probably throw a jig on it really if you wanted to. But yet it's the way it's made with the quality of blanket we've used. It's so light. I've actually rigged up a 3-aught EWG and a Cinco weightless and thrown that on here. And it throws it fine because the rod's so light. It's too strong of a rod for that technique, really, but you can do it. You can get away with it because of the way the rod's built. So
all purpose.
Very, very, yeah. If you want to buy one of our rods and be able to do the most amount of techniques, the 7.6 medium heavy is the one. It's the most versatile rod we have. So the areas are simple, guys. You want to find places you think they're going to be spawning or moving into spawn, and then amongst those places you want to find the warmest water and the most cover. So that's really how simple it is. If there's cover in the water and you think there might be some fish that'll spawn back there, you're in good shape. Now, the finer points of fishing a frog come in how you impart the action on it, how you trigger the bite. A lot of people like to walk a frog, just a steady walk. And that's fine. A lot of people like to just steady pop a frog. And that's fine. But doing subtle changes and more erratic action, I think it triggers more bites. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think it triggers more bites. Here's what I know for a fact. Without a doubt, without any doubt at all, it triggers bigger bites. You will catch bigger frogfish if you make more subtle or more subtle and violent, like more sudden change of direction action on your frog. You will get bigger bites if you do that. 100%, guaranteed. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm twitching a frog or jerk bait or a topwater, walking bait, whenever I'm walking a frog or I'll show you how to do some other stuff here in a minute. I like to line the rod up, so I'll palm the reel right here like this, and I line the rod up on my forearm so that when I'm twitching that bait, the rod butt is hitting my forearm. So now, if you watch that rod tip, when it hits my forearm, what happens to the rod tip? Where's it go? It goes back towards the bait, right? So that's why you do that, because when you twitch that bait and you hit the end of that slack, at that twitch right there, when it bounces back, that gives it tight slack, tight slack, tight slack. And that's what gives that frog some really subtle erratic action. Even when you're walking it, it'll walk sharper, more suddenly if you bounce it off your forearm. Now,
not moving the bait as far either.
Not moving the bait as far, and that's a big deal too. So, movement without movement is something we've preached on this channel in the past. If you look at big fish techniques, man, movement without movement is like so important to catch giants. A jig is a big fish bait, right? We all agree with that? Well, a jig will sit still and still be moving, right? Even when it sits still, a jig with those little strands of skirts and those appendages on whatever bait you put on, it's got movement while it's sitting dead still, right? A hollow body frog is known to be a big fish catcher. Well, when you're walking that thing, it's moving a whole lot without moving very much. Big soft plastic swim baits. Tail's going like this. Bait's moving like this. Real slow, right? If you fish those big weightless swim baits, big weedless, man, they go real slow. Glide bait, same thing. But forward, it's not tracking very fast at all. So movement without movement is a big deal. Creating a lot of reactive qualities without taking the bait away from the fish is a huge deal to catch bigger bass. My favorite way to do that when I'm working a frog is to twitch it as if I'm walking it, but do it in variable cadences and do it extremely hard and fast. So when I'm talking about twitching a frog, you know, if you're walking it, you're going. When I'm talking about doing it to get it erratic, we're talking about, it's hard to do without resistance on the end of the rod, but it's literally like twitch, 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 twitch. Like, just change how many times you do it. Hit it 3, hit it 5, hit it 4, hit it 2, and just give it little pauses in between, but bam, 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 bam. Just sudden erratic things like a bait fish scattering. That fish is looking up. When that bait gets over that fish, he's looking at it, guaranteed. Bass's eyes on top of their heads, he's looking at it. He's paying attention to it. They're curious creatures. He's looking at it, and it goes, man, it's like a cat with a laser pointer, guys. Think about that. Right, a cat with a laser pointer. If that laser pointer just goes like this, that cat might watch it all day. If that laser pointer goes, what's that cat going to do? Pounce. Same thing with these bass. Same exact thing with these bass. So if you can get that hard sudden reaction and make that frog really dart back and forth a few different ways real quick, and when you do that with these frogs I'm fixing to show you, sometimes that frog will literally sound like a fish ate it. Because before it's even done twitching this way, you're twitching back this way, and it'll make a flushing sound in the water. It almost sounds like a fish ate it. If you think that don't call up a big one to bite it, I mean, it does, right? We all know when bass see one fish feed or hear one fish, they get triggered by that. Man, it's a cool deal when you figure out how to make that sound and get that right action. So play with your action, try to be more violent and subtle with it at the same time, and vary it up, and I bet you'll get bigger bites. All right, let's talk about the actual frogs themselves. They don't have any spro popping frogs downstairs, okay? But man, there's several frogs on the market today that are very, very good. And so I grabbed a couple downstairs. These are both good. I'll throw, like if I had these two and a spro in my box, I don't care which one I grab. I'll grab any of the three and fish it. I will say early in the year, you see I grabbed 2 white ones, right? Early in the year, white seems to work better. We get a little later, bass have been spawning for a little while, some brim are showing up, then your greens and browns and your more natural colors tend to work, right? Right. So that's kind of the deal. If you get around a shad spawn and a shatter spawn on grass, then you can go back to white or shad pattern frogs, and you just kind of play it from there. But early in the year, for whatever reason, white seems to work better. I think it's this. I think it's a solid color. It shows up better in dirty water. And I think in dirty water, which we usually have, our water's more stained early in the year, in that dirtier water, I think everything turns more pale. So whether it's a brim, it's more pale. If it's shad, it's more pale. So having white is just kind of what they're seeing most of the time anyway. This is a 6-inch Vega frog, which is a popping frog. This is the big gabbit. They also make a pony gabbit by Mega Bass. But both these frogs about the same size profile. A spro is going to be a little bit smaller than these. It doesn't matter. Guys, listen, they ain't got no tape measure in their pocket. They're not up there measuring how long that frog is before they bite it. They're biting the splash as much as anything else. They don't know if your frog is 3 inches or 2 inches. They have no idea, right? They have no clue. So don't get too bent out of shape about size. Oh, they'll only bite the little frog. I want to throw a bigger frog for a big bite. A big frog will eat that. A big bass will eat that little frog, and a little bass will eat that big frog. I guarantee you. So don't worry about that. Now I've gone to where these frogs that are made today, these popping frogs that are made these days, like these two in the spro popping frog, are made so well and designed so well that you can do anything you want with them. Back in the day, you bought a popping frog and you bought a walking frog. Every one of these frogs that we're talking about tonight will walk. It's easy as any walking frog on the market. It'll run in a straight, like you can pop it in a straight line just as easy as you can one of the needle nose, pointy nose frogs. So the only thing this does is adds more splash because of the cup mouth. That's all. That's basically the difference between the two frogs nowadays. You can impart the same action on all of them. They're all made good. but you can actually move more water and splash more water with a cup mouth with a popping frog than you can the pointy nose frog, right? So I've gone to where I don't even have a pointy nose frog in my boat. All I have is popping frogs. So this one style of frog does it all. So if you have a brand you like, that's fine. Stick with that brand. If you don't, buy whichever one's available at the tackle store. You know what I mean? You're going to be fine with all of them. So don't get bent out of shape about, well, this frog's better than that frog or whatever. Okay? All right. Setting the hook. I've heard people talk about how long to wait on setting the hook. Let's talk about that for a second. I don't think you need to wait as long as most people do. I think if that fish is going to get that bait, that fish has probably got that bait. Now, you do want to make sure you get a big hook set into it. So you're not just twitch, and then jerk. Like it's twitch, get my feet right, and then jerk. And see, that puts that natural 1 second pause in there, right? So if I'm twitching, whoosh, and I set my feet, I just gave it the 1 second pause. Now I can hit it. Or a half second pause. But if I'm just twitch, like that, there's no pause. I think that's where you get in trouble. Don't try to quick set it. Make sure you get your feet set and get a big hook set on them. But if you do that, that'll give you that natural pause that you need. And you don't need any more than that. You don't want to... I've seen guys in my boat on guide trips. They're twitching, biting, they're like this ain't a Texas rig that's 100 feet away from the boat. You got to make sure he's got it. Like, if he blew up on it, he's either got it or he doesn't. Swing, baby. You know? Like, you ain't going to hurt nothing if he didn't get it. You just pulled it out of empty water, so swing. So...
And you can throw it right back.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. If they miss it, they talk about follow baits and having a Cinco or a flipping bait ready to follow on a frog, and sometimes that can work. Man, I truly believe that if a bass swung and missed at your bait, he's like, where'd it go? Well, I missed it. Where'd it go? And if you reel it in and get it right back on him, another time that it's good to have an 8-to-1 reel, reel it in and get it right back on him and twitch it again, 9 times out of 10 he's biting it again. The follow bait is the frog. The frog's the follow bait. The hell with the follow bait. Just get the frog back on him. He wants to bite a frog, let him bite it. So, yeah. Any questions on frogs?
Which one's the best one?
You know, I was at Welch about 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a little while, yeah.
You was throwing a frog out there, and fish kept missing it, right?
Yeah.
Off that rock pile. And so you got it out there, finally, and you were twitching it, but you were able to keep it in that same spot.
Mm-hmm.
How the hell did you do that?
Takes a lot of practice. That takes a lot of practice. So, in case the camera didn't hear, Gunny was back there talking about a trip that we went on where the fish were missing a frog, but when I was twitching it, I was able to keep it basically in the same spot. Basically, I was able to move it side to side without moving it forward. That takes an experienced touch and feel for the end of your slack. So what I'm doing there is I'm making sure, almost everybody, when they twitch, they pull through the end of their slack. So what I'm saying is their rod is moving and they're twitching it. They hit the end of the slack here and then they twitch it to here. They keep pulling to here. So that moves the frog forward before it cuts. Because when the frog, so what happens when you walk a bait is as the line goes tight, it straightens the bait out. When the line goes slack, it goes back. It straightens out, goes slack. Line tight, slack. Line tight, slack. So that's another reason hitting it on there and making that rod tip bounce back towards it is going to make it tighten up and go back that way even quicker because it's a sudden stop. It's not you twitching down here. And if you twitch it off your arm down here like most people do, there's some slowing down to that stop. It's not just a sudden you're not full speed stop like it is when you hit your arm. It's just full speed stop. So it makes it have that more subtle walking. So if you're asking how, it's number one by having a feel for the end of my slack and making sure that when my rod hits my forearm, that's exactly the moment that I'm hitting the end of my slack. And then by hitting my forearm, it makes it stop immediately. So it doesn't pull it forward at all. It just choom, choom, and it kind of stays in the same place. Something you got to practice.
In other words, practice.
Yeah, that's something you got to practice, really. It's hard to do. You got to practice that to get good at that. Yes, sir. Any other frog questions before we move on to flipping?
I had a few things about the frog that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on. All right.
So,
You gonna talk about adjustments out of the package? I didn't talk about that at all, did I?
no, sir. So I'll start off by color. He kind of touched on the color, but what I like to do, and why I think white is so good in the spring, is because in the spring, we have a lot of weather. We have a lot of overcast, a lot of wind, a lot of rain. All right, so what I think is white is what you need to throw on an overcast day, okay? Because on an overcast day, they're looking up and they're seeing that white. On a sunny day, they're looking up, that white blends in with the sky. So when the sun's the highest of the time, then that white isn't what you're going to want to use. You're going to use a darker color, whether it's, an orange belly or black or something like that. So that would be my advice on your colors also for the
and I've
weather.
always just thought when the sun's high and they can't see it as good, just make it splash harder.
Right. That works too. Spro makes, it's not a new one, but it's new to me. Is it called a spit? Spit frog?
Yeah, the spitter.
Man, that thing is actually pretty cool.
Is it? I don't know that.
It is totally different. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of different models. They got one that's got the legs on top of each other too, and I can't remember what that
That's
one's
the
called.
spitter.
Is it?
Yeah.
I've seen that one that's got the legs on top of each other. I thought, man, why would you do that? That's weird.
It makes a different
They
noise in the water
Yeah.
movement. But so right out of the package, what I always do is I take these hooks right here, I bend them out away from the body,
Yeah.
and I actually come up just a hair.
you come up with yours?
I do come up with my.
I don't move mine up at all. I do it out away from the body, and you do want like for me, what I want is when I run my hand down the frog. If I take my hand down the side of that frog and it don't catch a hook,
Yep.
I ain't got them bent out enough. If I run my head down and it stops on the hook and the hook kind of stabs me a little bit, I'm good.
Yeah, 'cause it'll help with your hookup ratio.
Don't bend that around
No.
now because that's
Well,
got to go back on the shelf.
Oh yeah, it's not all bad.
Oh, you can buy it.
But right now, I'm running my finger down it, and I'm not even feeling the points.
The way they come made to be totally weedless.
Yeah.
All of them. Every brand's that way.
So yeah, I bend mine up. I mean, not a whole lot, because if you bend it up too much, then you're gonna be catching junk.
You be catching
Everything.
all the junk you're throwing in, yeah.
But just come up just a tad, and man, it'll help.
Now you got to figure out how to manipulate them legs back to that little hole.
I'd probably just buy it.
Well, that works too.
But other than that, that's all.
Do you trim the legs at all?
Yes, I do.
So
trim
I did tell you trim it. What's your rule of thumb on your legs?
I go about an inch. I cut an inch off.
You cut an inch off?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the frog. Like Spro, what I do with a Spro frog, and it's a little bit shorter body, is I just hang it upside down and I put the leg and I press the legs down and I trim it at the nose of the frog. So the legs are the exact same length as the frog. That one's, you can't really do that because your legs will be too long in my opinion because that's a longer frog. And both of those two, that Megabass Gabbit and that Vega frog, are both longer body frogs. So if you did that with that, your legs would be a little too long. Still use it a measure tool if you want, and just trim them a little bit shorter, quarter inch, whatever, shorter. You don't want your legs to be so short where they just stand straight out and don't have any flow to them. Like you want the legs to kind of swing back and forth a little bit. So be careful, don't trim them too short where they just like this. I think that's going to make it harder to walk your frog, possibly, and it's just not going to have the same action. Maybe it's just me or it's just my fisherman's eye. It doesn't matter to the fish, but I like to trim them to where they're shorter and more compact bait, but they still have a little wiggle to them on the back. Then on that Spro, it works out easy. You just flip it over, line it up with the nose, and you're good. Real simple. That's it for frog adjustments. Any other frog questions?
But when you use the frog,
Right now,
right now,
58 degrees is my number. 58, really 55 or 56 you can. Like, especially like right now, there's a lot of water in the coves. It's like 55, 56 degrees. But 2 days ago, it was 65. So those fish pulled in their shot. Here's when you throw a frog. Here's a better answer for you. Forget the temperature, right? Don't worry about the temperature.
Yeah.
Let's worry about where the fish are located. Are the fish in the junk? Throw the frog. Because when the fish are in junk that's this deep, that frog's right on top of their head. It's in their strike zone. If the fish are in 3 or 4 foot of water, then maybe we need a little warmer temperature. We need them to be more active to come up and eat the frog. But when they're getting up in that stuff that's that deep, man, and there's a bunch of them in there like it is now. Like right now, Fort, there's a lot of fish in that much water in the junk. And that's the time to throw the frog. Absolutely. Most people wait too long to start throwing a frog every winter. You can catch a frog in January, February, and for sure in March. Every time when you get to March, you can always catch one frog. But in January, February, in the right conditions like we've had this year, you can catch them on a frog.
I think just yesterday we heard probably about 100 frogs.
what about a whopper plopper versus a frog?
Well, a whopper plopper's great. The only problem right now for a whopper plopper out here is going to be getting it tangled up in the flooded cover. we've got so much flooded cover. Them treble hook baits are going to be an issue. You know, you could take everything that I just said, besides the equipment, totally different equipment. But as far as how to get the fish to bite and like how to throw it and all that, yellow magic popper, you know, a topwater popper, I do it the exact same way as I do a frog. And you get bigger bites if you do that same erratic action. Okay. Now the equipment's totally different for a popper because you got a little bitty hook versus a big hook. But you can throw it in the same areas. But the problem with a popper is you try to throw it up there now, you miss your cast a little bit, you bring it back to water grass. You spend a lot of your day with wasted cast that way with treble hook baits right now in that slot. That's why when we were talking earlier, I said there's just a few techniques that are really good to throw in this situation. Every one of those techniques is weedless and one hook. Well, I guess a frog's got two, but y'all know what I mean, like the single style hooks. There are no treble hooks in any of it, you know. So that's the deal.
Now, if you're asking that just because you know maybe you can't work a frog, a good bait right now is also a buzz bait.
Yeah, buzz bait can work.
Yep.
Buzz bait can work right now, absolutely.
That way, because I figured that's why you probably asked. A lot of people that don't.
I'm used the frog a few times, not
Yeah.
with any success.
Frog's one of them baits. It's a hollow body frog especially. Now that's why I keep them separate from the ribbit and the horny toads and all that, because ribbit and the horny toad, you just throw it out there and reel it in. I mean, there's not much to it. A frog, you've actually got to work it and make the fish bite. Now, the thing about a frog is it's a big fish bait. Those hollow body frogs catch big fish. But all those baits that catch big fish, just about all of them, you kind of got to commit to them. The thing about big fish is, for whatever reason in their DNA, they were born more reluctant to bite. It's one of the main reasons they get so big, because they're more reluctant to get caught. You know, fish that get caught, guys, these fish we catch, not all of them survive. Some of them die when you put them back in the water. Newsflash, like delayed death happens to these fish we catch. You boat flip them, they flop around on the carpet, you bang their head on the boat coming in, just the stress of being caught, it kills some of them. So these fish that are really big, most of them probably hadn't been caught near as much as the other ones have. They're just naturally more reluctant to bite. So big fish techniques are often things that have a different action or more erratic, have the movement without movement. They really entice that fish to bite, and a lot of times that comes from your technique, which means you have to commit to it and get really, really good at it to get those big fish tricked. Does that make sense? Yeah. So fishing a frog the first time going out there, when you first start fishing, you're probably not going to catch them on it. It's going to take some time for you to learn what triggers a bite. Then once you get a bite, make sure you pay attention to what triggered it. Try to repeat that. And then the next day it may be something different. But the more you get bites on it, the more you learn how to trigger the bites, the more confident you'll get. Before you know it, instead of going out and catching, 10 2-pounders, you go out and you catch 6 or 7 5 and 6 pounders, and that's better in my book, Yeah. So, any other frog stuff? Show me how you flip, and then show me how you nay-nay.
I was about to say that. Stole my thunder, man. So, right now with the lake up, you've got a lot of submerged cover, okay? And also behind that cover, you got a lot of open bank. So, pitching and flipping, not only are you going to do it on the front side, do it on the back side too. Because them fish are back behind that, swimming. I mean, most of the time, when that happens, I'm throwing a weightless fluke back behind that. That they use that as a little highway as well. So don't overlook that just because you think it's too shallow. That's not true. So look out for that. So when it comes to flipping, all right. Talk about the baits first. So I'm using just a creature bait, a crawl bait. Whatever, what have you. Any brand. This is actually Buddy's custom made. He's a local guy here. He actually makes great plastics. I use a lot of his plastics. In black and blue, white, because of the color of the water right now. But what I like to do with this white is actually dip the pinchers in this red dye. Alright. So whenever it's fluttering down, that red, it gets their attention a lot more. You get more of a reaction by it. Also, whenever you hit the bottom, those pinchers are standing up and they're oscillating like this with that red, okay? That is a real cool trick. I promise. If you're having a hard time.
I don't think there's anything that's bad to put red on this time of year.
No.
You know what I mean? Like we throw. It was Dave was talking about a red swim jig in here a few seminars ago, and we all throw red traps and red chatterbaits and red spinnerbaits used to be the craze out here. We talk about tomato seed worm. Red's just good.
It is good. So you can cover a lot of water with this, just like you can a chatterbait, a square bill. Don't waste your time. My fishing partner, he likes to work it all the way back to the boat. That is a waste of time to me. When I'm pitching the edge of grass or cover, I'm pitching it in, popping it a couple times, kind of like when you're pitching, cover like in Lake Welsh or whatever. But pitch it in there, pop it a couple times. You don't get a bite, pull it out.
Real target oriented deal.
Yes.
Yeah, because if it stumps, you throw that stump, bounce it around a couple times, throw that stump, bounce around a couple times. Go.
Because you're trying to get a reaction back.
We used to have a game when we were flipping that I played with some buddies in the boats over the years, and it's you put your foot on the go button on the trolling motor, and now you don't set it on like high, right? You set it on just a normal, trolling motor. On that Lowrance, it's real powerful, so I do it on like 3 or 2.5. On old tracks, it'd probably be about 4 or so, right? But you just put it on a good pace where you're moving down the bank, just nice and easy. And if you get behind, you're flipping too slow. You got to keep up. If you get behind the boat, you're screwing up, dude. We're not covering enough water. You got to keep up with the boat, or you're doing it wrong.
Yep. You can go a ways without even getting a bite. I mean,
absolutely.
So I mean, don't go 100 yards and give up.
Would you say most of the bites, especially when you're flipping shallow water, most of the bites come when it first goes in on the fall?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so too.
9 times out of 10. Yeah.
I think so too.
Very rarely is it after a couple pops. Now, when I'm fishing stumps, most of the time it's after I pop it.
Yeah.
But
what size weight you throwing on there?
So I'm throwing a 5/16 or 3/8.
It's pretty light.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty light. Pretty light. I've gone to where anymore I just go heavier on everything, just out of trying to get a faster fall rate and maybe trigger a reaction a little bit that way. But that's one of them deals that you could go ask all the tour pros and you'd get 50-50 answers. Do you flip a lighter weight? Do you flip a heavier weight? Some guys are going to tell you the quarter, 3/8 ounce. Some guys are going to tell you half, 3/4. It's just personal preference.
Yeah. No.
None of them are wrong.
None of them are wrong. They cannot. Some days, they're all wrong depending on what day you ask them, right?
Yeah.
And they're all right depending on what day. Some days they're going to bite that 3/4 ounce better. Some days they're going to bite that 1/4 ounce better.
Yep, that's true. So how I'm rigging mine is with a 4/0 hook with a red bead. I couldn't find the bobber stops down there with some bobber stops. And the weight. So you go bobber stop, weight, bead, and the hook. You set that bobber stop about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch above the weight. That way it has that clacking noise whenever you're popping it. It ticks, ticks, ticks. 'Cause anything that drives bass crazy is noises like that.
Where'd you learn that shit?
I don't remember that guy's name, but he was pretty smart. I don't know.
That definitely wasn't me then. If he was smart. The bead deal's a real deal, man.
Are you getting ready for bedfish?
No, I do this just flipping.
He does it just flipping, and I know some other guys that do it just flipping, or even dragging a worm out in deeper water. They'll put a bead on it. It adds that noise, man. If you get out there and shake it, that bead just tick tick tick. It adds a noise, and why wouldn't you do it when you're not bed fishing? I've watched bed fish that won't come to a bait. You throw the one in there with the bead with that little gap in your bobber stop where it can just sit there and vibrate on that bead real quick. I've literally watched bedfish that won't come to the other bait. You throw that in there and rattle that bead, and they swim off like they did on every other bait. You hit that bead, and they turn back around and come look. Man, why wouldn't you do that when you're not, The only deterrent from throwing a bead is it chafes your line. You got to retop all the time, a lot when you're fishing with a bead. Even without catching a fish, just casting it a bunch. Every 20, 30 casts, whatever, you got to retie the line with the bead on it, because otherwise that glass edge will slowly chafe your line and cause break-offs.
That's right. Exactly right. And also talking about bees making that noise, that's something else I forgot about the frogs. I also put some of those little glass.
Yeah, you told me that you put those BB things, little BB chambers in the frog.
It does. It makes a difference sometimes.
Get a little click click.
Yeah, especially when I'm night fishing. When I was doing night tournaments,
Yeah,
it helped a lot too.
makes sense.
But as far as the line, I'm using 17-pound fluorocarbon. Seagull Red Label is what I use.
You ever changed the braid for how heavy? I was thinking about that today where we were pitching and flipping, and we were using 20-pound fluorocarbon today, pitching and flipping. But man, I was thinking, dude, we probably ought to be in this junk, like how heavy some of that stuff is. Because some of that stuff that flooded, it's thick and nasty. Man, probably ought to be using braid. You ever do that?
No, if I'm actually going to pitch it into the junk, yes. But if we're just fishing the edge line, no, no, I don't.
See, we're starting to flip now. For me, in my boat right now, we're starting to flip into the holes, like in any little crease, any little hole that we see in the flooded stuff. We're actually getting the bait up in there now, because I just seen some fish trying to act like they're doing their thing up there, and they're getting, like, you can actually see fish up in the junk sometimes. So we've started going inside of it.
Okay. Yeah. We haven't started doing that yet. We're just still fishing the edge, but yeah.
Braid when you go in it though, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
What size braid?
Same as a
Same
frog.
frog,
Yeah, 50 minimum. Most probably 65, probably a little better. Yeah, but 50 can get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm flipping pitching docks, I'm going up to 20. I'm not going to braid still. I'm still just
20 pound fluorocarbon?
Yeah, 20-pound fluorocarbon.
Yeah, anytime I'm fishing a wood structure, man, I hate having braid around wood.
Yeah.
I don't like, and there's so much wood in fork. You're fishing around some wood even when you're throwing it in the mat. But if I'm fishing in the flooded bushes, flooded grasses, or submergent grasses, hydraulic coontail, then braid's great. But when you get outside of that on the edge or whatever, or on a dock, that braid is a nightmare around wood.
Yeah. Now, if you're a beginner at flipping, braid, in my opinion, is actually better for you because braid is easier to get bird nests out of.
Easier to flip, easier to get bird nests out of, and also if you're not used to that hook set flipping, having that braid makes you don't have to set the hook as hard.
Yep, that's right too. Talking about rods, so what I use when I'm flipping is either my 7.5, my 7.6 medium heavy or my 7.7 heavy. The 7.7 heavy, it's more like a medium heavy. It's got a lot of tip to it, so either one of those is what I'm using to flip. Now when I'm flipping docks, I'm wanting a shorter rod. At that time, I'm using a 7.2 extra heavy, but it's fast tip. It's got a lot
Shorter rod just lets you be more accurate.
Yeah. So, but I mean, everybody should flip. If you don't, it's pretty basic. But do y'all have any questions about flipping?
When you flip the bait in there and you say you flip it in there, you just hop it a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
I see some people, they just kind of ease up on the bait like this. Just kind of. For me, when I do it, when I hop that bait, I want to actually snap slack.
Yep.
So I want that bait, just like that frog moves suddenly, I want that Texas rig that I'm pitching in there to go down and go as fast as it can, right? Like I want it to shoot up off the bottom. Same, it's from my principle, it's just the same. I'm always trying to put those instant movement reaction type of qualities to my presentation. If I can, if there's a way for me to do that. If it's a crankbait, I'm trying to bang it off something hard, bottom, rock, wood, whatever, make it deflect, right? If it's a chatterbait, we're trying to hit grass and let it jump out of that. And if it's a Texas rig, I'll actually have a little slack in my line. I snap that slack and make it hop up real quick.
Yep, I do the same thing. And then another thing I also do is just like you were talking about with the frog. If they explode on the frog but they miss it, get it right back in there. A lot of times I'll actually pitch within a foot of the same spot I pitched because a lot of times you catch some fish off guard. If you it was too late before you brought it out.
Yeah.
So if you go right back in there, a lot of times you'll get the bite the second time. So don't be afraid to kind of pitch the same spot a couple times before you move on. So
especially this time of year, these fish are getting to spawn. They get real stationary. Once they pull out of their creek channels, their shallow points, and they go into these pockets getting ready to spawn, these fish don't move. They're stationary. They're not moving hardly at all. You see them out there on your live sonar. If you have live sonar, you got to look on one of these shallow points and off the edge. Those fish are non-stop, dude. They're just, you can't hardly keep them on the screen. You get into a cove, these fish aren't wandering. They're hanging around looking for the right spot. You'll see some cruisers now and again. Usually that's because they're scared of your boat. Those fish, when they don't know you're there, they're just sitting still. So yeah, repetitive cast, hopping it up and down in the same place, all that kind of picking it apart, being methodical, all that stuff is, especially this time of year when they're getting ready to spawn or are spawning, I think it's really important.
yeah, I
If you
agree.
get in an area and you're seeing some fish or you're getting a couple bites, man, there's a lot more fish in there. Them fish don't, If one fish found a reason to spawn in there, others are finding reasons to spawn in there too. Very rarely, even when it's sight fishing season and we're going on looking at beds, very rarely do you see a fish on a bed. Like it's usually, like you'll go a long stretch and see nothing when you're looking for bedfish. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like they're all in that same little stretch. There's a reason they're there to spawn. So when you find some fish, get a bite or see one, whatever, this time of year, hit the brakes and just pick everything apart.
Yeah. Very good.
Any questions? That's good, dude. We're going to get done early because Fat Boy skipped lunch and fished straight through today. Dog, like, there's a ribeye over there that don't know the kind of hurt I'm fixing to put on it. I'm just telling you.
See, I was about falling asleep in here because I skipped lunch and then went and ate at 4:30 before I came here.
Oh, so you're ready for nap time?
Yeah.
Your belly already got wide.
That's it.
My belly's pretty wide now, but it ain't nothing on what it's fixing to be. You know what I mean? That's right. All right. Well, if y'all ain't got no questions, we can let you guys go, man. Appreciate y'all joining us. Thank you guys for watching. We'll actually be back here. Oh, I meant to tell y'all, we'll be back here for the seminar in 4 weeks. 2 weeks from now, I'm going out of town to a tackle store in Waco to do a seminar down there. So, yeah, we'll be back in 4 weeks. But y'all can catch the one in Waco on YouTube.
Any of y'all fishing tomorrow? Yeah, good luck. Yeah. You fishing the tournament?
You going to be bass chump? Oh, okay. Just fishing? I got you.